He was growling. Low, steady, not loud, but enough to freeze her at the door. The bobcat stood between the crib and the window, for slightly raised, golden eyes locked on something outside. Baby Samuel was still in the crib, eyes wide open, one hand reaching through the bars toward Rex's back. But the animal didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stood there, between the baby and the world, his body still as stone, but thrumming with silent warning. There was no sound from outside. No knocking. No wind. No intruder. Just the eerie quiet that comes right before something breaks. The woman, Samuel's grandmother, held her breath. She'd seen this before. The night they found the bobcat injured in the woods, blood on his hind leg, eyes wild and scared, he'd made the same sound. Back then, he was fighting for his life. But now, he wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for Samuel. And that terrified her more than anything. She hadn't planned for any of this. She hadn't planned to take in a wild animal. But 5 months ago, during a thunderstorm much like this one, she'd spotted him collapsed at the edge of her back porch, bleeding and shivering and too weak to run. She should have called animal control. Instead, she'd laid out a towel, boiled water, and kept her distance. For 3 days, he wouldn't let her touch him. On the 4th, Samuel crawled up beside the screen door, pressed his tiny palm to the glass, and whispered something only babies know how to say. Rex had looked up. And not growled. That was the moment everything changed. Not because it made sense. But because something happened that night, a silent understanding between a predator and a child. Since then, Rex hadn't left Samuel's side. Not once. Now, the bobcat was growling again. Not wild and flailing like when they found him, this was deliberate. Controlled. A low warning rumbling from deep in his throat, vibrating through his chest as he stood between Samuel and the window like a living barrier. The storm hadn't hit yet, but the clouds outside boiled thick and dark. The trees bent in one direction and then the other, their branches creaking like bones. Wind hadn't made it inside yet. But the silence was unnatural. And Rex felt it before she did. She took a step closer to the crib, but the bobcat turned his head just enough to look at her, no malice, just alert. Tense. Telling her, not yet. Don't speak. Don't move. Just wait. Samuel reached again, tiny fingers brushing the fur near Rex's tail. And the growling stopped. Not because the threat had passed. But because whatever it was, whatever had crept too close to the house, Rex was ready. The grandmother didn't speak. She knew better now. The first few weeks, she tried to explain it to herself. Told neighbors it was temporary. Called it an unusual bond. She even checked with a local wildlife vet who told her flat out, he's not safe. You can't keep him near a child. But Rex wasn't near the child. Rex belonged to the child. There was no leash, no cage, no command. Only presence. He followed Samuel through the house like a quiet shadow. When Samuel cried, Rex was there. When Samuel slept, Rex stood guard. He never purred. Never meowed. Never acted like anything domestic. But he never left. And he never hurt him. Not even when Samuel pulled his ear or climbed onto his back or clapped too loud. The clock ticked once, then again. The room felt thick with stillness. And then, just as suddenly, Rex relaxed. His ears softened. His tail lowered. His head dropped slightly. Whatever it was, it had passed. He walked slowly to the side of the crib and pressed his head beneath Samuel's dangling hand. The baby laughed, quiet and breathy, and closed his fist around a tuft of fur. Rex let him. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain came all at once, hammering the roof, drowning the silence. But inside, the only sound was the soft rustle of Samuel turning in his crib, and the steady breathing of the bobcat lying beside him. The woman leaned her back against the wall, letting herself slide to the floor. She didn't know what Rex had sensed out there. But she knew this, whatever it was, it didn't matter anymore. Because the bobcat had chosen his place, and it was here, beside the baby, ready for whatever came next. And she no longer questioned it. Rex did not sleep that night. Even after the storm eased into a steady drizzle, even after Samuel's soft breaths turned into the deep hum of a child truly at peace, Rex stayed alert. His body lay still beside the crib, but his ears twitched at every creak, every rustle beyond the window. Once, just before dawn, a branch snapped in the woods. He stood in a single smooth motion, looked out into the blackness, and didn't move again for a full hour. By morning, fog had wrapped the trees like a thick scarf, muting every sound outside. The house stood quiet. The woman moved slowly through the kitchen, barefoot, careful not to let the old floorboards creak too loud. She poured warm milk into Samuel's bottle and left the room without looking inside. Rex had claimed the space. Not by force, but by something deeper. A presence. An unspoken contract. She didn't know what to call it anymore. The neighbors didn't come around now. Not since the photo spread. A local nature photographer, one who lived out past the bend, had come by weeks earlier after the woman had called for advice about Rex's leg, which still had a subtle hitch when he walked. The man said nothing when he first saw the bobcat lying beside the baby on a picnic blanket. But later, he asked quietly, "Has he always done this?" She'd nodded. The photographer returned the next morning with a camera, and without speaking, began to document it. Rex, grooming his paws while Samuel chewed on a block. Rex, watching as Samuel slept beneath a tree. Rex, lying so close to the baby that his breath stirred the hair on Samuel's forehead. The photos went viral in 2 days. People called it a miracle. A blessing. A danger. But none of them knew the truth, it wasn't a story. It was a rhythm. By the second month, they didn't need words anymore. Samuel would wobble to his feet, arms open, and Rex would rise with a patience that no wild animal should possess. When Samuel pointed to the door, Rex followed. When the baby cried, Rex's body was the first thing he reached for. It wasn't a friendship, exactly. It was more like gravity. They were drawn together, always. Rex had his limits, though. If a new face entered the room too quickly, he would stand. He wouldn't growl, not unless he had to, but he would place himself in front of the crib, or in front of Samuel, and wait. His eyes didn't threaten. They warned. The limp was still there, but softer. The scar down his hind leg barely visible beneath his thickening coat. And when he looked at Samuel now, it wasn't out of fear or confusion. It was devotion. Not the kind people speak about in sentimental stories. The real kind. The kind that lives in actions and rituals and silent repetition. The kind that doesn't fade just because it isn't loud. But something else was changing too. Rex had begun to wake before dawn again, pacing near the back door, ears twitching. Some mornings he would stand for minutes at the window, staring into the tree, unmoving. The woman noticed. But she didn't speak of it. Because something in her heart, something she hadn't named yet, was starting to fear that the forest might be calling him back. It happened in the middle of the night. The wind was still. No thunder. No rain. Just the soft hum of insects outside and the rhythmic creak of the old porch swing that sometimes moved on its own when the air shifted. The woman had fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket pulled to her chin, the soft glow of a night lamp casting gentle shadows on the walls. She didn't hear it at first. Just the absence of a sound she had grown used to, the slow, steady padding of paws in the hallway. The house was quiet. Too quiet. When she opened her eyes, she knew something had changed. The air felt different. Heavy. And there was an ache in her chest that had no name. She sat up, blinked against the lamp's low light, and waited. Nothing. She called out once, softly. "Rex?" No answer. The nursery door was open, as always. She crossed the floor without thinking, heart beginning to pound now. The crib was there. The baby was there. Peaceful. Safe. Sleeping. But Rex was gone. No warmth beside the crib. No shadow curled near the rug. No soft breath stirring the air. Gone. She searched the house first. Quietly. Without panic, but not without fear. Kitchen, hallway, back porch. Every corner of the rooms he usually circled, all empty. His dish near the fireplace untouched. The back door was still locked. No windows open. Gone. Her first thought was injury. Maybe he'd crawled under the house. Or worse, outside through some gap. But she'd checked everything. There was no way he could have slipped out without her hearing. Unless he chose to leave. The forest was darker that night than she remembered. When she stepped onto the porch with a flashlight, mist clung low to the ground like smoke. The beam of light cut through trees but revealed nothing. She called again. "Rex, please." The only reply was the rustling of leaves far out in the woods. She stood there for a long time. Not calling anymore. Just, waiting. And then, something strange. The next morning, just before sunrise, she found something on the back step. Not Rex. But something of his. A feather. Small. Gray. Ragged on one side, like it had been caught or pulled. Tucked neatly beside it, so precisely placed it could not have been an accident, was a tiny piece of bark. Not random. Not windblown. Arranged. A message. She didn't understand it. Not yet. But she took it in silently and placed both inside a small wooden box, resting it beside the window where Samuel and Rex always sat in the afternoons. The boy was quiet that morning. He didn't cry. Didn't search. He simply sat beside the empty rug where Rex always curled, his small hands pressed flat to the fabric, unmoving. As if he understood. As if, somehow, something in his child's heart had already accepted it. Rex was gone. The hours passed slowly. The house felt hollow in its stillness. The woman caught herself holding her breath in doorways, listening for claws against wood, for the subtle sigh Rex always made when he settled down. But the silence remained. That night, Samuel woke at 2 a.m. Crying. Not from hunger. Not from fear. A soft, broken sound, more like confusion. She rushed to him, lifting him gently, pressing him close. But he arched toward the floor, tiny arms stretching, pointing to the rug. He wanted Rex. She knelt down with him, sat on the rug, let him lean forward. His hands moved across the threads, searching. Then, softly, he laid down, cheek to the floor, curled just like Rex used to curl. And she wept. Not loudly. Not even visibly. Just the kind of silent crying that happens when something too gentle is taken away without warning. She didn't sleep that night. She sat beside the crib and watched the trees through the window, waiting for eyes in the dark that never came. Days passed. No sign. The forest swallowed the silence again. The porch swing stayed still. The nights turned colder. And Samuel adjusted in his own quiet way, still playing, still laughing, but with a softness to him now. A space where something had been. The woman stopped setting Rex's food out. But she never moved the feather or the bark from the window. And then, nearly 10 days after he vanished, something changed. It was evening. Golden light flooded the nursery. Samuel was napping in the crib, hand clutching the edge of his blanket. The window was open just a crack to let the autumn air inside. That's when she heard it. Not a growl. Not a cry. Just a single thud. She turned, heart thudding in her chest, and there he was. Rex. Standing just beyond the porch in the fading light. His coat darker now, damp. A line of fresh scratches across his shoulder. But he was standing. Still. Watching her. They stared at each other for what felt like hours. Then slowly, he walked forward. Not to her. To the window. To Samuel. The boy stirred. And the moment his eyes opened, he smiled. Not surprised. Not startled. Just like he knew. Rex lay down below the window, placing his body where the light could fall across it. And breathed. The frost came early that year. By the end of October, the leaves had turned brittle gold, and the edges of the grass sparkled with thin ice before sunrise. The house, once filled with warmth and soft motion, now moved slower. The days were shorter. The shadows stretched longer across the nursery floor. But Rex was still there. He hadn't left again. Not even once. Since that evening he returned, he had reclaimed his place beside the crib as if no time had passed. His shoulder still carried the marks from whatever had happened in the woods, 3 shallow scars where fur refused to grow back. The woman never asked what caused them. Some questions were not meant to be answered. Samuel was walking now. Not just wobbling, but moving with purpose, arms out, feet strong, his laugh echoing through the hallways like light. And Rex followed him everywhere. Silent. Watchful. Still that same living presence who stood between the child and everything the world might offer that was too big, too sharp, too fast. And the boy had changed too. He no longer needed lullabies. He no longer clung to blankets or reached for toys when he was frightened. He simply looked for Rex. Sometimes, just a glance was enough. Other times, a hand brushing against fur as he passed. But always, there was that understanding between them, wordless, deep, old. One morning, the woman opened the back door and found Rex sitting there already, facing the woods. The sun hadn't risen yet. Fog clung low to the trees, and everything was still. She didn't call him. Just stepped out quietly, wrapped in her shawl, and stood beside him. For a long time, they both watched the tree lean, saying nothing. And then she whispered, more to the mist than to the bobcat beside her, "Are you leaving again?" Rex didn't move. Didn't twitch an ear. Just continued watching. Later that morning, as the light poured into the living room, Samuel stood at the window and tapped the glass with a flat palm. Outside, Rex was pacing again, slow, deliberate, stopping every few feet to look back at the house. The woman knew. This time, it wasn't a vanishing. It was a goodbye. She bundled Samuel up in his jacket and carried him to the porch. Rex stood at the edge of the yard now, just before the grass gave way to wild underbrush. The same spot where he had first appeared months ago. The same place she had left food, towels, space. Samuel reached forward without fear. His little arm stretched toward the creature who had never spoken, never purred, never played like other animals, but who had loved him in a way nothing else had. The bobcat walked forward. Stopped a foot away. Lowered his head. And for one final time, Samuel pressed his forehead against Rex's. No one spoke. No one moved. And then Rex turned, stepped silently into the trees, and was gone. There was no sound. No rustling. Just the way the leaves closed behind him like they'd been waiting. The woman didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, she sat down on the porch with Samuel in her lap and held him there, rocking gently as the morning sun broke through the fog and poured across the yard. Inside, beside the window, the little wooden box still rested on the sill. Inside it, a feather, a strip of bark, and now, a new offering. A tuft of fur, small and gray, left curled neatly on the porch boards like a parting gift. Samuel slept in her arms before the sun reached its peak. She carried him inside and laid him in his crib, brushing his hair gently from his forehead. He stirred, just once. One hand reached out into empty air. And rested where Rex used to be. That night, the porch swing moved on its own again, slowly, creaking once with the weight of memory, then falling still. No words remained. Only wind. Only trees. Only the silence left behind by a bond no one else would ever understand. And at the edge of the forest, barely visible in the silver light, a shape paused just long enough to look back. Then disappeared into the mist. Forever.